Let the record reflect, this meeting was posted in accordance to the Open Meeting Act. Please show all board members attending. We will adjust the agenda just a little bit because we do have our auditors here, so we're gonna go ahead and consider the minutes for the Board of Trustee meeting from October 21st. Do I have an approval?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Okay, so since we have the auditors, what we're gonna do is we're gonna move to item number 4, consider the acceptance of the audit financial report for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2025. Are you good? All you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for the opportunity to be here today. Most of you know me. My name is Andrew Haytonic. I'm a partner with Forbes Mazars, and I've had the pleasure of working with your organization for quite a few number of years now. And I just want to say thank you for allowing me to come in and see you guys, just like I have almost every year for every November for quite a few years in the past. I really do appreciate it. Today, we're going to be going over the audit for the year ended June 30, 2025. In front of you or in your packet, you should have two different things: a draft of the audited financial statements, and then a draft of the letter to those charged with governance, or the communication to those charged with governance. We're going to follow mostly along with that letter to those charged with governance. It's going to be kind of the highlight points, and at the back of it, I have a summary of the condensed consolidating financial statements and just some ratio analysis like we usually do to just kind of go over where the organization is this year as compared to where it has been over the last couple of years, and then compare it to some of its peer organizations as well, to give you a taste for how the organization is performing. As I said, these are in draft form. We do anticipate issuing, and we usually issue somewhere between November 30th and December 5th. So we'll probably be issuing final reports in the next couple of weeks. Just a couple high-level key communications that we'd like to make you aware of. This audit was performed in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards. We are required to be independent of your organization, both in fact and in appearance. And we didn't have any disagreements with management. We didn't have any difficulties in completing the audit. We didn't have any of those things that we typically communicate. There's no unusual items that you need to be aware of this year with respect to the audited financial statements. If you'll flip over to the third page, what I'd like to spend just a moment doing is highlighting for you the key things we want to highlight for you. What are the significant estimates that are included in your financial statements? And then what are the key financial statement disclosures? And I'll just be honest and tell you that most of those are the same things. And it's usually things like patient accounts receivable and what we expect to collect on those patient accounts receivable, the amounts due to or from third-party payers, including the state and Novitas and or Medicare. Those are going to be some of the biggest items that we have on the financial statements that pose the biggest significant estimates, as well as you likely know, the net pension liability and all the disclosures around those things. If I were to tell you to look at anything specifically, those are the things that I would call your attention to and encourage you to take a look at, just because they're the estimates that are included in the financial statement. Some things are exactly what you paid. There is no estimate related to it, and so there's not as much that you need to focus on. As part of any audit, as you know, we usually come up with identifying some journal entries that we encourage management to post, and then some that are determined to be passed upon because they are not significant to the overall financial statements. This year, the journal entries that we did post as part of the audit process every year is the net pension liability and all the adjustments related to that particular. We get the information pretty late in the process, and we ended up posting that based on the actuarial information that's provided. We did have an adjustment related to patient accounts receivable and related allowances. We also, in just a moment, we'll mention the fact that we also had a past adjustment to patient accounts receivable and allowances. What I'll say is management has a pretty conservative number when it comes to what the net collectible amounts on the balance sheet are at the end of the year. So when you think about that, in my mind, I would say you want it to be right, but if you're going to be wrong, let's be conservative with it, and let's say there's probably going to collect maybe a little bit more than we have on the books than less. And so if there is a difference one way or another, it's definitely to the conservative side of things. And then there were various adjustments proposed by management. through the process. With respect to those adjustments that are passed or uncorrected misstatements, again, these are typically considered to be not material to the overall financial statements, both by us and by management, and thus we didn't record them. The big ones, again, there's one on patient accounts receivable, one related to the due to from third-party payers, and then a couple others that quite frankly are not significant at all to the overall financials.
Good.
And then as you turn a couple pages later, or actually the next page, we'll talk about, we always have some deficiencies that we communicate as part of the audit process, and really it's almost always this one particular item. Anytime we identify adjustments or past adjustments to the financial statements, we're required by standards to communicate that as a deficiency. Then we evaluate, is it a material weakness, is it a significant deficiency, or just a standard control deficiency? And in this case, it did not rise to a level that is larger than a standard control deficiency, which has been the case most of the years that I've been out here working with your organization. Any questions before I get into financial statements? If you'll turn a couple more pages and look at the asset side of the balance sheet.
Can I see the numbers?
You should have the actual audit if you want to.
Yes, I would like to
It's
follow
a draft,
along.
just so we're.
Yeah,
it will
thank
be
you.
That's what we're
changing.
going through.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So if you look at the asset side of the balance sheet, what you will see is what I like to give you is just a flavor for what's changed year over year. So when I look at the asset side of the balance sheet, what jumps out the page at me is that there's a couple numbers that decreased this year compared to last year. Specifically, the cash and cash equivalents went down by about $6.5 million, and patient accounts receivable went down by about $7 million. Now, why is that important? Well, if you flip to the next page, and I don't usually like to just try and tie them together, but if on the next page, the very last current liability is called advances from third-party payers. If you'll recall last year, because of the Optum Change Healthcare issues that they had, the organization received $17.3 million in advances from Optum that they had to pay back. And they also had a whole bunch of cash as a result of that. Through the process, not only did you collect all the old AR, then you paid back down the liability to Optum, and as a result, you saw a decrease in cash because you used that cash that you received from accounts receivable to pay off the Optum liability, and you received down, you paid down, or you collected those accounts receivable. So all that kind of ties together. There's other things, obviously, that move the needle on both accounts receivable, which is continuing to be collected at a higher rate than historically has been, and then the cash balances. But that's like the biggest pieces of what jumps out of the page and says, this is why cash changed by $6 million this year. Other things I'll call your attention to, the organization's capital assets increased by $21 million this year. That's after depreciation of about $15 million. So that tells me that the organization invested $36 to $40 million in property, plant, and equipment during the year. And I'm pretty sure that's ongoing because a lot of those projects are still not finished and continuing to be completed. That includes things like the roof, which has been an ongoing issue, GORE and cash locations for LCHC, which are pretty big outlays. So all of those together are just continued investments that the organization is making in the property, plant, and equipment for the future. All told, total assets and deferred outflows of resources increased by about $12 million year over year. When you flip up to the next page, the things that jump out to me, accounts payable increased this year by about $8 million year over year. When talking with the team management, that includes a bunch of big projects that are ongoing. Includes a lot of the construction invoices that we were just talking about, things that are large scale that the organization has been doing, especially late in the year, and as a result, that drove up accounts payable at year end. You also saw about an $8 million or $7 million increase in estimated amounts due to third-party payers. There's a lot of different pieces that are going on with that, be it cost report settlements for the current year, prior year cost report settlements. The state has a DISH program that they operate, and that they came to the conclusion that there were some liabilities related to there. So there's just a lot of fluctuation in that particular bucket. The other big thing that I'd like to, other than, I want to point out once again, the advances from third-party payers, it was a $17 million liability last year. It's zero in the current year. The other point I'd make is the net pension liability has decreased by $5.9 million this year compared to last year. That involves the hospital continuing to fund at a substantial rate. I think it's 5.8 or 6.2 or whatever the contribution was this year was in the upper $5 million contribution, but also the investment portfolio did really well. As the economy and NASDAQ and all the NYSE, the market did really well. That usually drives down net pension liabilities and increases the pension funded status of the plans that are outstanding. All told, the total liabilities and deferred inflows of resources were about, they decreased by about $8 million this year. I haven't had lines together, sorry. If you'll turn with me to the next page, statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position. The organization's operating revenues increased by about $14 million this year. The expenses increased by about $19 million this year, so all told, the operating income decreased from 10.5 to 6.8 million, but I just gotta point out that is not common. Most of the hospitals that I'm working with do not have sizable operating indicators. They might have decent sized total indicators because they've got sales tax or something else that's buoying some of those numbers, but operations have not been something I've continued to see a positive indicator on. So that's a pretty strong result. All told, the increase in net position for the organization this year was $20 million compared to the $37 million in the prior year. And quite frankly, that's still very strong given that last year included $15 million of insurance recoveries and about $7.5 or $8 million of the 340B settlement that kind of made that look even stronger. So year over year, you're pretty consistent, maybe even better compared to where you were the prior year.
It's great. Good news.
If you'll turn to the next page, we'll just take a minute, look at ratio and trends of the organization over the last few years, and then also look at some of your peer organizations. I had trouble with the life care metrics this year, so I wasn't able to put it in yet, but I will try and pull that together. But I used S&P, Fitch, and Moody's this year because I just like the idea of getting all the indicators to give you all an indication of how the hospital is doing. Also, S&P is the only one who rates pension funded status, or at least what I could find in the data that they put out. And I know y'all like to have that, so I'd like to give y'all an indicator of how that's doing. Current ratio of the organization is about 1.33. Again, we just talked about things like AP and a couple other current liabilities might be a little bit higher than normal as a result of construction projects, and we've got a few things going on right now. So that number can fluctuate because it's just a metric of current liabilities compared to current assets. So at the end of the day, you're at 1.33, which is pretty consistent with where you've been. I told Becky when I looked at this a few minutes ago, days revenue and accounts receivable that's a really strong number. I don't see many of my hospitals that are seeing numbers that strong. 40 point anything. I mean, most of my hospitals are upper 40s, if not 50s, consistently. And I have some of your peers that are probably in the 60s on a somewhat regular basis. It's not an easy thing to do to collect the accounts receivable and convert it into cash. So for you to be in that lower number, that's a very strong number. All of your peers in the rated agencies are in the upper 40s. So for y'all to be at 40, I think that's a really strong. Number. Days cash on hand right now is in our low 70s. Again, that's pretty consistent with where the hospital's been over the last few years, and I don't like 2022 for this particular metric. You hadn't paid all the advances from COVID back at that particular point, so it makes it look like the numbers were really inflated when the truth was you owed the money back in the first place, and so it didn't feel right to include it.
Andrew, on the S&P, Fitch, and Moody's, I assume that's related to investment grade?
I would, yes. I mean, I would say that generally speaking, this is going to include your investments too, but there are some others that have massive amounts of investment portfolio. Cash and investments to debt just gives you an idea of how many times over you can use the cash and investments the organization has to pay off the debt that you currently have, and you're at about 151.57, so at 1.5 times, which is again improved from where you were the last couple of years. That's pretty much in line with where some of your peers are from a rated agency perspective. Debt to capitalization is at 24.2%. I will call to your attention that will probably go up shortly. However, it's pretty in line with where your peers are from the rated agency's perspective. I don't like to use that particular number when it comes to life care organizations, because about 2 or 3 of them have no debt, and then 3 or 4 of them have a lot of debt, and it's just it tells you a number in the middle, but it's not necessarily the indicator of like all of the different facilities. So that number can be construed in a lot of different ways. Total operating margin for the organization is 1.6%. Similarly, total margin is 4.6%. Those are pretty strong numbers, both compared to where you have been historically and compared to your peers. That's a pretty strong number. I'm not seeing that in many of your other peers right now. And then pension funded status. The organization's pension funded status is up to about 88% right now. That's up from 81% last year. And and it's compared to, so S&P, they're at 97.3%. I think they really focus on that at some of the larger rated organizations. And there, quite frankly, aren't as many of those pensions outstanding any longer, unless, I would say the vast majority are probably out in the West Coast. I know that I was looking at one just a few minutes ago, but their pension funded status was in the 95% or something along those lines. But anytime the market goes up, the pension plan's funded status usually improves.
The actuaries feel as long as there's not any major market corrections, major declines, we're on path with our historical funding, probably 5 to 7 years to have it fully funded.
Be great.
Yeah, so we're strong.
Who are, as you're well aware, we have an acquisition, we're taking on another hospital. Who are we gonna, who's gonna be our peers at that point? We're kinda in the middle of, we're bigger than most peers and smaller than some. I mean, where does the peers come about at that point in time? We'll have total beds of how much?
450.
Is there anybody else in our group that we're kinda comparing?
There's only one. I mean, Norman would be the only one.
Norman's, maybe Stillwater.
Stillwater's a little bit smaller.
Right. I mean,
Not
Wichita
dramatic.
Falls,
Right.
they're not in life care, so we
Right.
compare to that, that's a little bit of a different ballgame.
I mean, to be fair, the other hospital I was doing a quality review on just a few minutes ago is in California, and it's a $600 or $700 million hospital. So you start to have to look outside
Right.
the state, outside of Norman and Stillwater would be your correct.
Of course, Norman's terribly struggling, so
Right.
it's hard to compare with them because they've got their own issues.
Well, you build a brand new, beautiful, incredible facility, and sometimes it comes with the debt load that is difficult to.
Manage.
Yeah.
It's the same revenue.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
just
same
move it from here
revenue.
to there.
And they didn't, it's not like they got additional revenue.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Pressure from competition
Oh, yeah,
than there was.
huge amount of competition up there. I don't have any questions. Looks like a good report.
Andrew, as always, thank you to you and your team. Is there anything you would like to discuss with the board without management present?
No.
You see no dangerous trends?
I mean, other than healthcare in the United States is a challenging environment to operate in. And I work with a lot of hospitals your size, rural, small, smaller, everything, and I worry about that.
Oh, yeah,
But,
they're struggling and it could get worse.
and and I know that y'all aren't necessarily rural for this, but like the tranche, the $50 billion tranche that all the states are trying to figure out how to allocate, and everyone's trying to get their hands in that pot, whether or not they're really rural hospitals. I mean, like that, it's a challenge. And whether, irrespective of political party or what you believe, it's not going to change unless there's a few things that change pretty substantially. So,
It's not only a challenge, it's concerning and can be scary. I mean, because it's definitely an unknown.
Any other questions from the board? Do I have a motion to accept the audit financial report for fiscal year ending June 30, 2025?
As presented, yes. I'll move it.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?